Thank you, everybody, for coming to this evening. Tonight, August 30th, this is a HPDD Review Board hearing for 6 p.m. On the board is Mr. Dick Williams, Jim Purington, Michelle Van Riet, Doug Briggs, Tamika Murphy is our secretary, and I'm Chris Senecal, the chair. Also here, I'll just make note of Mike Sullivan, who is the chair of the RDIC board, you guys all know, and welcome again. I see you. And also on line, we have the civil engineer, Wes Fliss, and also our interim planner, town planner who took over for Dave George, Mr. Richard Harris. He's online as well, and nobody else, right?
Isn't it the actor?
Okay.
Richard Harris, you don't know about him?
So,
Wow.
anyways.
Mr.
So
Harris,
first up-
I'll be up to see you soon.
So first up on the order of business is the meeting minutes from March 15, 2023. Do we have a motion to accept the minutes?
So moved.
We have a second.
I'll second.
All right, we have a second. Any discussion on the meeting minutes of March 15th, 23? The only thing I would like to add, or I just want to actually discuss,
Yeah.
is one of the reasons they were looking to do the stockpiling and they came before us was because of the phasing. And I didn't see any mention of the phasing in the meeting minutes. But if you recall, and I believe it was, they didn't have the room to stockpile everything in phase one. They needed to expand out of phase one. And just to protect the applicant as well as the town, that we allowed them to do that as part of that. And I don't know if there's anything in there. I didn't see anything, Tamika, about that, but I just think that should be noted.
Yep.
I believe that was, Attorney, I believe that was one of the reasons you were in front of us, correct?
Exactly, yeah.
To go outside that phase one bound so that you weren't stirring up any problems and,
Right.
that would keep these guys, I mean, that should be
If
documented.
you remember on the outside roadway,
Yeah.
the roadway that extended out of phase one down into phase two
Yeah.
was where all the stockpiling in place was taking place. That was shown on that revised
It's
plan.
ongoing now, so.
Correct.
We better document it because it's happening, so.
Absolutely.
And, but the board recall that? I mean,
Yes,
okay.
I just figured it was referenced on the sheets, but.
I just didn't see it in there, and if anybody does,
Yeah.
correct me if I'm wrong, but I just want to let
I
them
do
make that
remember
addition.
That was the major
that
reason why they did it, yeah.
moving outside that phasing for stockpiling would be allowed. That's really what we're trying to get in there.
I'll make the motion.
Any other-
With amendment.
And I'll second it.
All right, any other discussion?
Beautiful, thank
All right,
you.
hearing none, all in favor to accept the meeting minutes amended as we discussed? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Abstain.
Abstain, any nays? No nays, 4 passes, okay. There we go. Meeting minutes are accepted. All right, next up on the agenda is the public hearing for Harbor Classic, excuse me, Harbor Classic Homes, Harmony Place, 86 Maple Ave. They have proposed revisions to the utility plan and to formal site plan for the 55 and over community at the Rutland Heights property. I just would like to make everybody on the board aware of all the documentation that we've received. Tamika has done an outstanding job receiving these emails and, navigating them to the right people in town and collecting that information from all you guys. And getting that stuff to us here. So there's blueprints, there's drawings, there's home specs we're gonna discuss, the utility plan we're gonna discuss. There was information from the planning board we received. Was there any other communication from town people? Just the planning board was all we've received, okay? So I guess at this time, I was just gonna open this up to the applicants and let them explain all these changes and describe all this wonderful information you have for us this evening. So, Attorney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Peter Campobasso. My offices are at 3 Park Street in Leominster, Mass. Thank you for setting this public hearing up. What we're going to try to discuss and present tonight are some modifications to the site plan that was approved. Primarily, what's been driving those, now that they are starting at the site. One of the significant things that happened was after the land deal took place, they hired a 55 and older consultant to go in and start to look at the place. And based on some of the reviews and recommendations, I think the requests or the recommendations were that the units be a little tweaked to sort of accommodate the spirit of 55 and older aging in place. And I'm not sure what order we will go in tonight. I kind of think maybe if we take
Perhaps
some.
if, excuse me if I may, but if you want to just kind of go along with your outline letter to our board.
Okay.
Everybody has a copy of this. This is the letter from Attorney Kemp Basso dated August 18th, and he kind of basically put into some context here and itemized 1 through, let's see, about 1 through 5 or 6 items here, 4 or 5 items.
Correct.
And so you might as well we'll start with those.
Because I think, if I understand it correctly, Wes, if he is given permission, he can share his screen and pull these plans right up on that screen so that we can follow along.
Peter would have heard you say that back there and enabled him. So if Wes wants to try, he should be able to screen share.
Hi, Wes, can you hear us?
Mr. Chairman, sorry, can I interrupt
can
a
hear you.
second?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can now, yep.
Can I just interrupt a second? We have a majority of the RDIC here between Michelle, Dick, myself, and Tim Narwhal. Would you mind if we just called our meeting to order?
Tim Narwhal's online.
Yeah.
We just joined.
Claim jumpers, huh?
So can
Does
someone,
anybody on the board have a problem with that?
No.
No, I have no problem. Yep, go ahead.
so we've opened our meeting at,
6:12.
okay, sorry.
No,
Sorry to
no problem.
interrupt.
That's fine. Go ahead, sorry.
Okay, so what I tried to do when I wrote this letter was to just go in some type of an organized sequential manner based on the site plan that was approved, because in the decision, reference is made to the plan set titled, and it has the big name, and it has 16 sheets. The first sheet you're looking at is the second sheet in the plan set. It's just called Proposed Index Plan. And all that really does for the board and for anybody looking at the plan, if you notice right to the right-hand side on the bottom, there's a box that says revisions.
Right there.
And every time that that Haley Ward draws a plan set, they date them, they title them, and as you see, we go up the numbers. So there's been about 5 or 6 revisions that have all been incorporated at one time or another. And right now, I think we're on the 6th or the 7th revisions. So that was the first sheet that I had pointed out in my correspondence. The second paragraph deals with sheets 3 and 4, which are the site and grading plans. The site and grading plans just reflect the new units, the layout of the new units, based on some of the shapes and the sizes.
And Attorney, that's your physical exterior dimensions,
Correct.
correct?
Yes, yep. It's done to basically locate.
Just to bring everybody up on the board, that you guys have increased some of the widths of like the garages and maybe perhaps some of the hallways within the unit, just to make it more,
So initially, what was shown on the site plan that was approved were units that were the combined building was 54 feet in width.
okay,
What the proposal now and what this site and grading plan shows on sheets 3 and 4 are 58-foot building footprints. And when you get into the architectural plans and the actual design plans, you'll see what the difference is. So on these particular plans, there are different things that show, like for instance, now some of the amenities that have been added. As you come into the entrance, before there was a entranceway with an island, and initially when the site plan was approved, there was no sign in that landscaped island. One of the proposed changes that we're requesting tonight is to locate a monument sign inside that landscaped island, right in
the
there.
center island of the road,
Yes.
is that right?
Yeah.
Not off to the side.
No, not off to the side. And it's placed far enough up in the landscaped island that it's not a visual impairment to either
Someone
turning right or
pulling
left.
out, yeah.
Exactly, because it still keeps the travel lanes separate so that people that are exiting are gonna be on one side, people that are entering are gonna be on the other. And it gives enough, I'm not sure if you can actually see where the monument sign will be located. I
Can
think
see
it-
his, that's that little like oval circle?
It's right, yeah, see, it's far enough up so
Right
that
there, yeah.
it's out of the right-of-way site path so that it would not be any type of visual impairment.
Is there any detail on the size sign that you're looking to do? At least just the exterior, top, bottom, width, dimension, maximum dimension.
I believe that
Can that be provided?
Laurel did probably send that quite some,
Any,
So we had originally proposed 4 by 8. We would wanna make sure that it's big enough, given the distance back from the road, that it was visible from the road.
Right.
So, and what I understand is that we would go through the permitting process to make sure that the monument sign met all those standards.
excuse me, there was a sign already off to the side, right? Correct, is that right?
Correct, yeah.
Was it on the swale side there?
yes.
Where the pickleball.
Oh, where the pickleball is, okay, not the swale side.
So that's why the
Well, we gotta have the pickleball, you gotta make room for that.
So, a few of the amenity recommendations that came about, obviously the pickleball courts in the dog park. So, right now, what's proposed, that definitely 2 pickleball courts are going to go in the facility. We would prefer to have the approval based on 4, so that depending on how the units sell and the people that are actually moving in there, if the demand is requiring 2 more pickleball courts, they can be added without the need to come back to the board and say, can we have 2 more pickleball courts? The intent is to do it because the applicants think that the demand would be there. I do know that pickleball seems to be like the new craze
All
in
the
the
rage,
country. And it's something that is catching on, and it is a good amenity to have
It's a great one,
at the facility. So that is shown on the site and grading plans. The dog park is a little further down. It's probably on the,
Down at the bottom.
are there 2 dog parks or 1? Oh, so there's 2 dog parks, all right, so
Shows
there's,
the one here.
Maybe.
there's one there at the very bottom, and then there's one at the main road entranceway as you keep driving straight. It's down behind, somewhere in phase 1.
Right there. That's a possibility.
Do we have a flat area in this area here, Pete?
Yes,
And we aren't calling it as a dog park yet until they're gonna leave it as a placeholder for an additional dog park if they need it.
okay, all right. So,
And then one thing on the pickleball courts, I know we show them in this orientation, what we'd like to say is we want a placeholder in this area of the pickleball courts. The more we're learning about the pickleball courts, we're gonna need to rotate them. And we're trying to get more information on which way they need to be rotated, so that the sun doesn't get in the eyes of the players.
Yeah, like a tennis goes north and south.
it's complicated stuff,
What they do.
pickleball courts.
Yeah, I would imagine pickleball would probably be that same flow, north-south flow.
Exactly, so, but I think,
What is due north on that plan, on this plan here?
Pretty close.
Due north is
Close, huh, Jim? Yeah.
right here.
so they might have to be angled a little bit, so.
Yeah,
So
yeah, it is off.
they have to at least be rotated 90 degrees, and maybe it's 60 degrees to be exactly due north is what we're looking at. So we're trying to figure out if we can get away with doing 90 to be able to fit the 4 courts still in there.
The other way, yeah. Just one thing, I know, with some pickleball courts, sound attenuation has been a complaint in some towns that I've heard and seen. Have you addressed that at all as part of this plan?
I think,
That is why we moved them.
yeah, I think
this area.
the concern was to have them in a location where the sound would be the least impactful to the residents.
It's a lower elevation than the units. So
Right,
the sound
and so one of the things we did is we suppressed them about 8 feet from the closest unit.
So it's almost like there's a natural
Little buffer there.
sound barrier with it being depressed.
Even the units are, the grade goes up across the street as well? So
Correct.
Where the, yes.
so the
Could
courts
see
are
that.
almost flush with the street, but then it goes up back up on the other side of the
You
street.
see where his arrow is right
Yeah,
now?
yeah.
That looks like it's about a 6-foot drop.
Another 6, 8 foot bank there, the other one. Now, what about like do they just walk up to this? Is it fenced in? Is it like open for the public? Like, how is access? You know, I'm assuming you're not just leaving this open for the town of Rutland,
No.
obviously, it's just for the
It'll
people.
be fenced in.
Okay, so there's some type
And
of,
that's one of the reasons we haven't proposed parking by there, is just to
To keep the
dissuade
public.
any, right, yeah. And we have talked about whether or not we needed some kind of code access, so we'll broach that.
What I've seen in some communities is, I guess they have these electronic devices and people have they call it a bob. You can walk up to it, it's almost like a pass key.
yeah, very regular key fob.
You hit the lock and it opens so you can go in. Or some type of a coding system where people will be able to punch in the code to get in. Okay? And then the
You might need power there, and you might wanna let that,
Yep.
I don't know if you have how close one of those connection boxes for the,
There is a transformer right there, but we have not addressed that.
okay.
We also recognize that we may need to think about water in both of those locations, both the pickleball
point,
court
yeah.
and the dog park.
Yeah, alright.
Okay, and then the other part of the site and grading plans, and this is really hard to see and hard to explain, because the units are 4 feet wider, the grading between the units is changing slightly because of the pitch and what have you. But
What's the distance between the units now?
It's only 2 feet per unit.
so it'll
4 feet
it'll be
per-
combined
4 feet
4
closer.
feet. So before there was 20 feet, now it'll be 16 feet.
Do you guys know what the over 55 is?
I don't know, Jimmy, I think said it was like down to 10 or something in his. Like, it was a really low number, do you remember what?
I don't remember.
It was much lower than 16. But I don't know what the town code is, but I know that Jimmy said that the fire, due to the fire code regulations or whatever, he was able to do it.
Yeah, I mean, as long as we're within the, you know, if we don't have it in this bylaw, we
Regulations,
fall
yeah.
back to that bylaw, which, you know, would be.
So in your HPDD bylaw, if you just bear with me 1 second.
Yeah, please.
I think it was, I'm sorry.
Oh, I forgot something. My office, like, I feel like I'm forgetting something. Bylaws, I always like to bring the bylaws in.
I know that this was one of the things that I had discussed quite a bit with Dave George, because it was kind of silent. And there were requirements that were in the senior housing.
Yeah,
And for some reason, my recollection is that it was 10 feet. But I'll try to find that if need be. I printed out the different sections.
Dick, do you remember what that is?
I think it's 10 foot.
10 feet?
Yeah, that's what I recalled as well.
Right.
And it's difficult to follow because you gotta go to the HPDD requirements first.
Yeah, which
There
there
really aren't any.
there are none, correct, which would send you to the
We
over.
went to the senior housing,
Correct, Peter.
and then from the senior housing, we went to the strict, dimensional and regulations. So my recollection is it was a 10-foot setback along those lines. So there would be enough, the primary concern would be to make sure that the,
And I even do remember, even with talking with Dave George back then, like we had the authority to even go tighter, but I would recommend if this board wanted to go, let's just say it is 10 feet, which I believe, everybody, if they were 8 feet, then we could still allow that, but at that point, you'd wanna start bringing in opinions of the fire department.
Right.
Planning board, other people, I
Correct.
wouldn't feel comfortable just letting that rip.
Correct.
But as long as we're within those guidelines, I mean, I don't see any issue, okay, just at first blush here, that as long as if it is 10 feet, like we say,
Okay.
and you're 16, I mean, I personally, I don't have any problem, I don't know about anybody else on the board, as far as that goes, but that was a concern of mine coming into this meeting, like, how close are they gonna be now, cause the dimensions weren't marked on this drawing, so.
Right.
I was just wanted to find that out. And then the same thing, does the dimensions change from the street to the front of them, and then the depth of them between the units and back to back?
Front, towards the back, all we did is incorporate where the patio is we showed, or lanai's it. All we did is incorporate that as a living space, and then move that to the right or left. Depending on so it really didn't make if you squared off the footprint.
I think what's really driving the increased width of the
width.
units is the ADA compliance for the disabilities, so that if you look at the architectural drawings that were submitted, you'll notice that there's wheelchair, circles, so that you can establish that the hallways are wide enough for a wheelchair to get in and out, to access bathrooms, different, things along those lines, so that someone who might be, confined to a wheelchair or need a wheelchair is gonna be able to easily move throughout the unit. That was really,
And these are not ADA units, but that's just general access.
Right.
Even just from a rehabilitation point of view, if someone was in a chair for a month or two, just rehabbing, then they know they're in the right place or something like that.
Or even aging in place.
and I think that's the big thing, that the recommendation from the consultant was, if you're gonna have somebody that's gonna buy a unit, hopefully if they're, over 55, it's not something they're gonna have to move out of in 10 years because they either have a disability, handicap, or their mobility is compromised. So it just makes it, makes more sense to have that type of a building, so that people won't be forced to,
And that lady that was
just
sitting
gonna
there
say
when
that.
she brought that up.
She started it.
She did.
She was free, you didn't have to pay her.
Yep.
But I tell you.
I'm glad you mentioned it
really
because-
triggered it off.
I'm
Yep.
glad you
She did.
mentioned
Yeah,
it
she
because
did.
I do recall that, and I was going
Funny, huh?
to point out to the
She
board
was such a
that
nice little lady.
one of the potential buyers was one of the
Yeah.
first people that was here saying, hey, is it
Absolutely.
wide enough?
Right out of the mouths, right?
I
So
was-
sure enough,
I was so pleased that it had a person from outside came.
Yes,
and did that.
absolutely.
so what ends up happening between the buildings, what have you, and, cause I had questioned Wes on this myself, it's like, how do we show this grading? And he kinda chuckled to me and he said, it's so, minuscule. He said, there is a change, he said, but it's so hard to demonstrate on a plan with elevations, because once they get out there and they do it, obviously they're losing, a couple of feet on either side of the building, and with the way they have to pitch away from foundations and stuff, the grading might be a little like this instead of like that. So it's very slight, but that's one of the things that will also, be taken into consideration when they're out there actually doing the construction. Okay?
Does anybody have any questions or concerns about grading, what they're talking about as far as just pitching the property? I mean, that's just something they're gonna do, and if they don't, he's gonna get called back to fix it. And personally, it ain't gonna matter to me, it'll matter to him, so I'm sure they'll do it.
And
Fun is getting in the basement.
depending on how the plans that were submitted, they incorporate the different layouts. The exterior of the building and the exterior footprint really does not change, depending on what option someone might want to buy. If you go through it, you'll see, option duplex A, option duplex B, where it shows one might have a two-stall garage, one might have a one-stall, the ability.
That is in the depth, when you say two-stall versus one.
Exactly.
Just to make that clear,
Yep.
right, it's not the width.
Not the
like-
width.
Like normally people conceive of it.
And when if someone were to select the unit that had the ability to have two cars pull into a garage, it would affect what goes beyond, because the living room might go from one side. Some units that have, one stall have the ability to have an exterior patio in the back. Again, it doesn't,
So one
affect the
question with
width.
that,
Yep,
okay, like you show on this plan here, you have the option to have like that little bump out room off the back on one side, like if you had the extra bed, it's not a bedroom, but the extra little office in the middle, thank you,
Space,
right?
whatever.
So that bumps out the back a little bit. So when I look at your site plan, all of these structures are just square along the back
Correct.
walls. Only the
It's
fronts have the little
It's
notch.
the square.
So your square is here,
correct,
not here.
correct.
On this plan. Just wanna make sure
Yep.
everybody, that's the way I believe you explained it on the first go around.
Right,
But now that we receive this plan, I just wanna make sure that's still the intention.
that's
on
still
this
the
one.
intent,
Yep.
correct. They're not really changing,
So this site plan, board members, is almost, the building footprint is actually a little larger than it'll probably be compared to this layout here where you have the notch in. So just so everybody's aware of that. Cause it almost makes it look like you're missing something on this compared to that, and I just wanna make sure that that's clarified.
Okay.
No notches are shown on the back of these
Yes,
site
as you
plans.
see on that outside, they're all rectangles.
Yeah, they're just all
It's
flat on the
just-
back of
it's
the
the
property,
box,
so.
yes,
You know,
it's
and
the
and again,
box.
it's only an issue where you have, quite honestly, where you're back-to-back units that I was concerned about it. Now you have two people that want that bump out.
right,
You know, next thing you know, they're shaking hands out the window, you know?
Yeah.
right, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay,
The bump out won't exceed that outside dimension. Yep.
so that would really take care of sheets 3 and 4. The next sheet would be the landscaping plan. Because and that's sheet 9 in the plan set. Because the building footprint has changed a little bit, then locations of shrubs and trees had to change. And that's what's shown on the landscape plan,
Was quantity reduced or just locations changed?
just locations.
And what in
The
general,
most significant change.
Yeah, go ahead, Wes.
Location is along the pickleball courts.
Yes.
Before, we kind of had it as a straight line through this area, and the sign over in this location where the pickleball court is.
okay,
Other than that, the number of plants haven't changed, just the kind of the location of them.
so a tree between like all the units, that's the way it always was before?
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah, I just had to move them around to move them where the different jogs and have come in place, and
Yeah.
where that 2 feet have kind of pushed each building out a little further. And so the tree had to move over a little bit here, and the shrubs had to move a little bit, and
Yeah, it kind of favors the
all the
notch.
same
type of-
numbers. It's just, they got moved a little bit here and there by a couple feet.
Yeah, okay. All right. So you do have some buffering with the vegetation around the pickleball
Correct.
courts as well, too.
Yes.
Yeah. And it will be, again, it'll be a little elevated.
Yeah.
Right.
Sunken in the ground.
Yeah, and then it will come up, you're coming up almost 8 feet from the pickleball court to the first floor of that next unit. And so we're looking close to 1 story of difference in elevation there between the pickleball court and the closest units.
You know, I don't know if we wanna continue that tree line down that, just to protect that unit, I don't know, you know, but that'd be the only thing I could think of recommending if you guys care or not, I don't really, I'm indifferent. Any other,
Great, indifferent.
you know? I mean, if there's, somebody has a problem with it, they're gonna have to deal with it through the association, so.
Yeah.
It's not,
Absolutely.
you know, I'm just trying to protect the baseline here, so it's not one person against 140 others, yeah, I mean, that's just not a fair fight here. You
Right.
know, try to keep it somewhat plain, you know, but, you know. And that side of the unit, I mean, that's, well, you're not gonna be out there at midnight anyways, for crying out loud. Mike, you had your hand
Has
up, go
there been
ahead.
any thought of lighting the pickleball courts?
Discuss that real brief.
Okay.
We now have to go into that. We have to now think about that, right?
Okay, I know you
And
mentioned
we're,
it.
yeah, we're looking at other HOA agreements for that sort of thing and what works for them. Same thing with the dog park, you know, so
Yeah.
We have to include some sort of watering system when it comes to that. We've
Yeah, I
been
mean,
going
lighting's an
around-
interesting
We've
point,
been going
'cause-
around looking at water, dog parks and stuff, so we're learning those too.
Because you could envision tonight, like tonight, people might wanna be out there at 8, 8:30 playing pickleball and it's dark.
Especially as the days get, you know,
Right.
a little shorter here, you know? You
Going
got some
fast.
hardcore pickleball, you know? Some of those matches get pretty serious,
They do.
you know? They're gonna
They
play to the
absolute-
death, no matter what the
they
weather
absolutely
is, whether the sunlight is, and,
I
you
think
know.
there should be some sort of challenge match to open the courts, you know? That's what I'm saying.
Chris,
Yeah.
does adding lighting to either of those facilities require our approval?
You know, it should be on the site plan, it should be something that we review. Number one, just from a photometric point of view, we don't wanna make sure nothing's gonna shine in that roadway and blind anybody pulling in, okay? And then just, you know, the abutters, cause they are close, I mean, those units are, you know, only 15, 20 feet away, even
Correct.
from the banking, so, you know. But imagine, you know, and obviously, just from the pickleball court, you gotta have the lights up at least 10 feet high, so you're not blinding them people, it's not like a bollard light that'd be 4 or 5 feet high off the ground, so. You know, but they can, with LEDs and the optics and and the house side shields, they can tighten it right up on that and keep it tight there, you know?
Yeah.
It's nothing you can't, you know, your lighting consultant guys can't do for you. I mean, your civil guy, I'm sure he has a lighting guy you can talk to and do that for him, you know?
I've been to
Landscape architect.
3 homeowners associations where they have pickleball courts. None of them have lighting, where it would be something that people are playing pickleball until 10, 11 o'clock at night.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, that would be a concern of mine right there, because, you know, just from the neighbor's point of view, from the sound, you know, I mean, let's shut this thing down around 8, 9 o'clock, right? I mean, let's be real here. So the lighting could be somewhat of a advantageous and disadvantage to the, you know.
And again,
so.
that's why we're gonna really scour other HOA, you know, agreements and plans and how they handle it. To learn by experience from somebody else.
Yes.
I mean, I'm fine right now, just, you know, you don't show any lighting, so we're not approving any lighting. And if you do something, just do a quick photometric plan for our approval, and, I don't think that'll be an issue at all.
Okay.
You know, and as far as the timing of all that, that's just something there, you know, the HOA has to work out. with the- You know, listen, if these 140 people wanna play pickleball till 2 in the morning, I don't care, you know? But, you know, that's something they'll work out, you know?
Yeah.
But,
Exactly, yeah.
just let it be what it'll be.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. And then I think, as far as the plans are concerned, the only other detail that had to be incorporated on sheet 10 was the erosion control. Because of the addition of the pickleball courts, Wes is showing you where the additional erosion control is on the plan now. It's between basically the pickleball courts and the buildings, because obviously, because it's depressed.
You got a little swale there,
Sorry, it's just a can. Yeah, it's just my water can, sorry.
Wes, what do you
So
got, like a
just-
little swale there? Below the court?
No, it's just the hill, you know, we're just looking at a 2-to-1 slope, like I said, probably a 6-foot high, 2-to-1 slope there, and then it's gonna pitch up a little bit more to the buildings, and so I just wanna make sure that it's, you know, the erosion, control is taken care of on that slope with it being a 2-to-1 slope.
So I can't read these elevations there, but the, is that just all grass? Or is that like riprap or something?
Should be grass.
Just grass,
We
right?
we'd call it to be a grass,
But,
you know, they'd spray it
6, 8.
or put some kind of jute matting down
but that,
so that it sticks and.
so coming off the pickleball courts, it's gonna dip down and then go up the banking, correct? So that there's a little, like, grass swale, if you will? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, they could put it, you know, they could put a swale around the outside of it to
Yeah,
get the
just a
water to
little
get
cut
around the
to keep
courts.
the,
Flooding.
The courts will be raised a little bit when they build them in.
yeah. Alright. But that's the only change on the,
On the erosion control.
erosion control, nothing else, none of these other,
Because I think if you look at the prior plan, basically it just incorporates how they've been putting the erosion control, as they've gone along and done their cuts, you know, in place. According to the last revision.
Correct, yeah, so the areas of road control and the other areas haven't changed.
any questions from the board?
Oh, good.
Okay. All right, so,
So what, Ron and Laura are hoping to accomplish, is if the architectural plan, if these revisions are approved, the intent is to submit for building permits, next week with the building inspector. Obviously, with a little bit of, it's not necessarily a requirement, but one of the conditions in the approval was that they, develop the site according to the land development agreement. And there is a requirement in there that the first 88 units be built within a certain period of time. And the clock had to start ticking at some point. And September 1st is the date that starts the time period for the 88 units to be constructed in.
gotcha.
So the hope is that they'll be able to go in, submit, we did provide Tamika with stamped architectural drawings so that she could submit one to the building inspector and, they'll start that process if it hasn't already started. The intent is to get those next week. And that would be helpful if the building permits could be issued, because obviously, it's getting to that time of the year where they wanna start and get certain construction things done so that they can start full force on the units. I think once they get the first, one or two building permits out of the way and work out the kinks, moving forward, it should just sort of become a routine, task.
Yeah, it's nice to get things rolling along.
Yeah.
All right, so just in general speaking here, so we have these issues that the attorney addressed in his letter, site plan, et cetera. We also have the other, utility thing, but that's a separate thing. We're not, anything we vote on these are just on these items, and basically we could just go by his letter, outline those 4 items. One, the title sheet, 2, drawings 3 and 4.
And just so we're clear, within the project itself, all of the utility lines will be underground.
Correct, the plans show that. Yep.
And that's not changing.
Yep, you got the pole, it's even underground a little bit coming up the road before it turns down the
Exactly,
main driveway, the pole, couple hundred feet away or whatever, 100 feet away.
exactly.
So,
Will there be a pole on the main road in
no, it's down the,
down on the hill? No, but
Yeah.
in the heights, there will be a pole.
so on that plan there, and we'll get into that, coming off of like where Doug lives, coming up
Yes.
the road, there's poles all on the left side. And then going, where the Y is, the lines go across that, just when you get off the Y, you'll see in the plans, just a little way, halfway up that hill is the last pole, and then it goes underground
Got
there,
it.
and then goes down the road.
Okay.
Really, by that opening, you're not gonna see any overhead lines in that entrance area for a good, 50 to 100 feet from the entrance. But the plans do show that, and we can go over that. So that's a separate issue, we'll discuss
Yeah.
that after this. We're looking to vote on these items tonight, and we could really, like I said, use his letter to kind of build a framework to draw, write up the decision. And so, I don't know if we wanna go through these as one complete, all 4 is one, or do we wanna do them individually? I don't know, what's the best way you think to do that?
If you're comfortable with all of them, I would say you can approve it as.
Just approve all these drawings as one revision?
Reference that document as presented in.
His letter and these drawings,
Yeah.
and all the other drawings. I hope you got the list of them, because
Sorry.
the list of drawings is Tamika knows.
And just to give the board a little more comfort, because this is a site plan approval, it's really the site plan that controls, so that when they go to the building inspector and ask for permits and stuff, they do have to build per the site plan that's approved. So, as you're seeing these plans that are being displayed, that were submitted, those are the changes. So you can do it one or two ways. You can, go by the letter, because I did identify the sheets.
I would like to reference the letter, and I'll just tell you why, attorney. Just that, kind kinda dating myself maybe, but, you know, drawings used to, when they made revisions in drawings, the engineers and architects would always cloud the changes on the drawing, and like, here, this is change 6, there'd be a little triangle, it's change 6. So as a contractor or anybody, you knew what the change was, you didn't have to go through and look at every drawing. But today, in the essence of speed, they'll make one little change, like that one little erosion thing, they don't cloud the thing, so now how do you know what's changed? Now you're gonna go through the whole drawing and look at it. So, rather than having to go through that whole process, we're gonna reference this letter
That's
to these changes, and if there's any other changes, they're not approved. You know, if they, and again, you guys have been straight up, but trust me, there are some guys you'd go through the whole drawing on, you know, and make sure every little thing was checked, so.
Right, no, I
That's the only
understand.
thing I wanna say.
I
you know.
understand.
And I'm not telling them how to do
perfectly
his
fine.
drawings, but just how to be accurate and,
Yeah.
you know. So, we'll reference this site, you know, these site plan changes as directed changes by the attorney's letter, something to that degree. We'll write the decision up. Again, that's not my forte of the language on this, but, you're great at that, Tamika, so,
Figure it out, don't worry.
yeah. So, any other questions for the applicant or anything else, or anything else you'd like to state?
We'll probably discuss the water line and the utility lines, but I don't think that those are really, the water line is installed per the site plan, but there's no changes to the water line, so that's completed.
Great, good, super. All right.
Just in the nick of
I
time.
just noticed that Tim has his hand up.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so at this time, we'll open up the public discussion. That's a good point. Thank you, I'm sorry. Tim Narwhal has his hand up. Tim, if you'd like to go ahead and let it rip, buddy.
Well, to
I
your
love
point,
the hand.
Chris,
Yeah.
I thought, and Dick could tell me if I'm wrong, but I thought in the subdivision regs or one of our regs, we actually changed that to indicate that revs have to be called out with, you know, triangles or numbers or something like that. I thought that's in our standards now, but I could be wrong. I thought we changed it few years ago, but maybe I'm wrong. Because I had the same problem as you, Chris. We'd have the builders come in, and I'm not going through 6 revisions trying to figure out what's been changed. So I just, from an engineering standpoint, I said this got to stop. And I thought we changed it in our subdivisions. But Dick, I can't remember if we did or didn't.
You know, it was brought up, but whether or not it was changed,
Would that have to go to town vote, Tim?
No,
No.
it's a regulation. It's not a bylaw.
Not a bylaw, gotcha.
yeah. Where's
So-
Dave, when you need him?
I know that's the problem, Dick. I can't remember. I just remember the discussion came up, and
Yeah.
Clee and Mark Elbag have been doing that on their drawings lately, putting the triangle with the rev number on it. So again, maybe it was something we just told them and didn't get and haven't had the regs updated, but that's something that Rutland was going to standardize on, clouding and rev blocks from now on, so we don't have to do it. Chris said, and try to figure out 7 revs ago what changed. That's it. Just a comment.
All right, thanks, Tim.
I was
Any,
gonna say, I don't see our new town planner on the board here.
well, he told me, the interim town planner, he only had about 20 minutes, 30 minutes. He
okay.
had another meeting he had to jump onto, so he was only gonna be on for a short time.
I understand your point.
Yeah.
I mean,
Again, it's-
I
Not many people do it these days. It used to be common, you know, 20
I
years ago.
have some heated discussions with people about changes on plans, so I know what you're pointing out. Wes, is there a way you might be able to do that, or?
I mean, I'll be honest with you, does the board have a serious concern about these changes? I don't think there's, in my opinion, I don't think there's anything dramatic enough here to really dig in on, okay? I'd ask like a gentleman, if you do anything in the future, just cloud them to make it easy for us. Because now, actually, the smaller the changes are, the harder it is to compare the two drawings. When you're blowing the whole thing up and doing it over again, that's easy, because you're looking at the whole plan, you know?
Right.
But when it's one little thing here, one little thing there, you're like, oh my God, you know? And you just wanna making sure, we're just trying to do the best thing for everybody, the town and you.
I don't think the modifications to the site plan that are happening tonight are significant in detail such that you can't distinguish.
Exactly.
I mean,
You put a
location,
pickleball
location of the pickleball courts, width of the buildings. So that's really the gist of what these revisions are, so.
So,
And I hope that might address Mr. Norwald's point as well, so.
And again, I mean, it's a great point by Tim, and it's nice to hear from the other side what they're doing, because I'm not in their conversations that much, being on the zoning board too in this, but, again, I'm not too concerned about these drawings. Your letter outlines it very distinctly and clearly, and to be honest with you, that attached to this, I got no issue with, the way we've kind of proposed it, that these drawings revised per the attorney's letter and as said changes, and I think that's fine with me, if that's good with everybody else on the board. The only thing I'd like to clarify is just really, how does the board feel about the monument sign? Do you feel like we need to just say it's gonna be maximum size, like, such, 4x8 max? Or, because at that point, when you start changing the dimensions of things, traffic sight lines change, and I get a little concerned about that. I mean, personally, I'm gonna care about a foot or so, but, you tell somebody, you just give them open, next thing you know, there's a, Green Deal Mall sign going up there, and
I think 4x8 was the max, 32 square feet.
is that the sign bylaw, Max?
I believe so.
I did try to look earlier today, I was looking all over the place, the bylaw, the different codes. I could not find a specific section that dealt with signs. So, is there?
I thought there was a specific section.
There's a
Excuse me, but
specific
there
sign
is- There's a
bylaw.
sign
Sign
bylaw.
bylaw, but
That was contentious at town meeting when it was going.
Okay, so
And 4x8 was for temporary, I think there might be a little bit bigger for permanent, I can't be sure.
but whatever,
See, I didn't think I thought 4x8 was it.
I think that I think the safety of the sign would be obviously, the sign that they do put up would comply with the bylaw, so that when they do go in with the building inspector and get permission, if the requirement is that it be, 2 feet wide by 10 feet long and, 6 feet high, and the sign would be proposed to be longer, the building inspector would say, sorry, you can't do it. It might require a variance. So we'd know if we were in compliance or not in compliance with the sign regulations. And I'm sure that the sign that they will propose is gonna be in compliance with the.
And so with that being said, and I agree with you, you're in compliance, as long as the sign doesn't extend out towards the main road any further.
And that's.
So your 4x8 shown on the plan right now, this thing can go to 4 to 16 feet, just, it goes back in towards your property. That's all I mean, that's my only concern, is just the sight line, that's all.
Okay,
You can backlight it, you can fluorescent it, you can make it any color that you guys, whatever this bylaws is, the bylaws is, but just don't go more towards the road. Is
Okay.
what you've put on the drawings, than anything else with that is what you got, because that's the only really concern. Anything else, anybody?
Nothing I know of.
Anything from the RDIC or?
No, I'm here as the RDIC kind of no planner. I'm just trying to keep everything under my head to know what's going on. Just one thing you just said though, the backlighting, I'm sure that the sign
The
bylaws.
bylaws cover that, Mike, yeah,
Specifically
absolutely, yeah.
regulates backlighting, so.
Because, the dental guy across from Blair has his backlit, I mean, some
I
of them
want to be
are,
able to
some of
sleep
them
at night. I
aren't.
don't want that light blink, glaring in my
It's gonna
bedroom
go right
window.
through your bedroom window. Yeah.
Put the score of the pickleball games on.
The only thing about that is I purposely don't light my basketball court or my pool, because I figure when it gets dark, it's time for people to go home.
All right, anything else from the public, any other comments? Yeah, Tim, go ahead.
Yeah, in our, I guess they call it the sign section in Rutland, they talk about an entrance sign being no more than 16 square feet, so I don't know what that works out to. 3.5 by 5 or something like that, but they call it multi-unit dwelling complexes, and then there's an entrance sign, 2 freestanding or monuments be provided each roadway entrance to a subdivision or existing neighborhood, not to exceed 16 square feet in area. So that's just something thrown out.
How far off the road is that?
Well, it says no, the actual
You don't-
sign it's saying can't be more. It doesn't go
They
into
don't dictate
anything
where you
about-
put it, they just dictate the size, dimensions, and lighting.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Site
exactly.
plan dictates where you put it, yeah.
Off of the Heights Way, I thought maybe off
Yeah,
that
well,
easement.
that's not gonna work.
Are they gonna put it in that
It's
island?
32,
I don't remember the island, did we have an island from the last time?
A what?
which is 4.
The island always
Yes,
there?
to split the.
Yeah, it was there, and I know we
I
just kinda
think
shrunk
you-
it
I
down.
think
Well, we
you
shrunk
were
it
the
down.
one- But I think you
So
were
I-
the one
Wow,
that
that
insisted
doesn't-
on
yeah,
it,
that's
so
a-
for
that's
safety.
not-
I didn't think I want, no, I didn't want the island, I shrunk it down,
Oh,
cause they had it
okay.
going down past the
It
other,
doesn't
I
make
do
sense, cause we
remember.
have
They
signs
never-
that are a lot
that's why I
bigger
didn't
than
think they
that
even had
in
one.
town now.
cause this drawing, the Mass Electric drawing doesn't have it. This National Grid drawing doesn't have that island.
And then,
So
Chris,
I-
then we've got in the sign bylaw for, it says non-residential and mixed use, which that's not this. We're talking the residential,
Yeah.
it says 32 square feet, so we're sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Not consistent?
Yeah. Well, that'd
Wait
be
a
4
minute,
by 8.
the first thing is the courts, it's
32
not a
square
house, so therefore it's not residential.
That's true.
So I think what the intent for the sign is, the design they have right now is 32 square feet. All right?
Sounds like from that bylaw, you're limited to 16. You can go for the variance.
Yeah, and it says 2 at 16, so I guess maybe you put
Oh, maybe they can allow one at
classic and
32.
then homes on the other one. I'm just being a smart aleck, but there's ways to
That's
get
right, because
around
you did say
anything.
2 at 16 square feet, so maybe you can have 1 at 32.
Yeah, it's,
Uh,
I mean, my thought is whatever the regulation is, you can have, but I think a 4x8's way too big for, I mean, just aesthetically, but that's whatever the regulations call for, that's what you do.
Okay.
If for some reason it does become an issue, I know that there's a desire to have the 32 square foot sign because of the way it will be designed and how it's going to help, as, from an aesthetic standpoint. The entranceway to a lot of these developments is very important. Because when people pull in and out of a project, sometimes the entranceway can distinguish it in such a manner that it's very appealing.
Mhm.
I know that Laurel has spent a considerable amount of time looking into the entrance sign. So that if we do run into a problem, we can have a more detailed discussion with the building inspector to get his input on it. And if we feel that the sign that, once they know exactly what type of sign they want to come in with, the size, the dimensions, and what have you, we'll come back to the board if it's significantly different than this, or we run into a problem, so that we can make you aware of it. And whatever avenue we have to follow.
Yeah, I don't think we as a board have the ability to grant them a variance. We don't have the ability to grant the variance on a signed bylaw. That'd be something you'd have to go to the
Right, to the
ZBA on,
ZBA,
right?
yeah.
Obviously.
Actually, I thought that's what we were, was ZBA.
No,
On this on this particular
not
property.
a zoning, but we're the planning board for this thing. And so the big difference is you always wanna remember, if you look at Mass General laws, cause being the chairman on the ZBA, right, cause I've had this conversation with Norm when you guys took over some of the site plan reviews, I'm like, that's fine, I don't really care who does site plan review, but planning boards do not have the authority to grant variances. That is only the ZBA that has the ability to change a bylaw. And if you look in the Mass General laws, it's very specific about that.
I look in the,
That's why Worcester has, like, the ZBA does a lot of site plan reviews
right.
because
but
so many variances
we
are
are a different
required.
entity than the rest of the town.
It's a Mass General law. It applies
So
to every town.
So
What do you-
just with, I don't mean to interrupt,
Yeah.
but it really distinguishes between if an applicant is trying to go for a special permit, which is 48 section 9, or a variance, which is 48 section 10.
Yeah.
Planning boards typically issue special permits.
ZBAs do as well,
ZBAs
Can.
issue special
like
permits.
in our town, the cell tower.
But the way the statute is written, if someone were to need a variance, it goes before the Board of Appeals. So, and then with the way the bylaws have expanded in scope, typically your bylaw will state who the permit granting authority is, whether it be the planning board, whether it be the zoning board. And in this particular instance, because you've created a special district in your community, that's the Heights Plan Development District, it's the HPDD board that has exclusive jurisdiction over granting site plan approvals for the projects within that district. So,
And wouldn't that include a cell tower or
No, cause in our bylaws, cell towers go to the ZBA. And the reason
No,
being.
but I'm just saying, if I look under the legislation that was written, all right, and it stipulates what our powers are,
But Doug, the reason why the cell tower is not done by the planning board is because in its
I'm not
true
saying planning
essence.
board, I'm saying us.
No, I'm
We're not
just
the-
trying to explain to you why the ZBA does a cell tower and not the planning board. And it's kind of the motive behind the thought of process. Putting a cell tower in a residential zone is a zoning variance. So planning boards don't have that authority to change the zoning. They can't allow a use that's not allowed there. That's why the ZBA has to hear a cell tower going into a residential area. There's special permits, okay?
Well, I
That the
don't disagree with
FCC
what
says they
you're
can
saying.
go anywhere they want. But in general, you don't see planning boards hearing cell tower issues because it is a zoning it's basically, you're granting a variance for this
Well-
industrial application to be in a residential thing.
The distinction that you're making is, it's primarily based on the proposed use versus dimensional requirements, setback requirements, site plan approvals. So it's really the use that sort of drives where an applicant has to go, and that's what the two of you are sort of.
So if we grant this, we don't say grant it, because we're not really granting it, but if we just say, okay, go ahead, and you go ahead and then you wanna come back for a variance, then you're not coming back to us, you're gonna go back to you.
That's my opinion.
Okay.
But anybody else could
I
have their own
think-
opinion.
So
I think I'm reading this and I think that what you're saying is correct, Chris. So I found it online, the Heights Plan Development District. In Article 5, Section F, it says that the review board and formal site plan, the RDIC shall distribute copies of the formal site plan within 15 days of the submission date to our HPDD review board, planning board, board of selectmen, building inspector, Department of Public Works, Conservation Commission, Recreation Commission, Board of Health, Fire and Police Chiefs, for review and comment. The HPDD review board shall within 45 days, I can skip all this. Going down to the next paragraph, the HPDD review board may grant with conditions, or deny the site plan. However, it shall not deny a site plan unless it fails to furnish adequate information for review of the project or fails to meet the requirements related to the various considerations imposed by this bylaw, the act, and the reuse plan, or the Rutland zoning bylaw. So is that what you're saying? If it doesn't match the Rutland zoning bylaw, it would have to go to the ZBA?
In general, okay, with all the lawyers I've dealt with, being on this side of the fence, if you are, the Board of Appeals hears all, if you wanna change, if you're gonna try to do something that's not in a bylaw, it's basically the Board of Appeals, the only authority in a town that has the ability to allow somebody to do that. And that's just a simple, it's not the way the law is written, but that's the general rule of thumb.
Yeah.
Planning boards and this board or whatever else, city councils, you cannot change, you cannot, like, for instance, we could not allow residential homes up there. It's
Right.
part of this bylaw. We
Yes.
do not have that authority as this board to allow residential homes, because that's not what it's supposed to be.
Right.
And to me, a sign is the same thing. We have a bylaw that says signs a certain size, and I'm in total agreement with Jim, like, that's the size it is. If it doesn't match for you, I mean, that's fine, but we don't have that authority to go outside those bylaws. I mean, it says in there, we have to follow, like the 55 and over, we just discussed, what's that dimension?
Right.
And it gave
We have to
14 things
default
that
to
we have
those.
to do, and then at the bottom of that, those 14 items, it says the applicant and HPD shall comply with the rules and regulations of the planning board as they relate to the definitive plans for details related to the above requirements.
If it's not in our bylaws, we have to fall back on those, so. Anyways,
No, it's too bad it wasn't a farmer, because I tell you, put a set of tires on it with the tongue in it, and therefore you can have as big as you want, because with a trailer, you can have as big a sign you want.
might go with your motif, I don't know.
I don't wanna belabor the point, but it's not uncommon for an applicant, depending on the type of project and development they're proposing, to have to go before multiple boards
Yeah.
within a community, so it's an issue that they clearly will pay attention to, and if the, the powers that be make the decision, we need a 36 square foot sign and it violates the bylaw, then, we might have to be before the zoning board and more than likely back before this board saying, okay, we can do this, but you still have to approve the sign.
So Chris, can I just, I don't wanna belabor the point either, but, so let's just suppose their setback was gonna be, you know, if it's supposed to be, I think it's 30 feet, and they were gonna be 28 feet. Are you suggesting that they would have to go to the ZBA to get that approved?
I do believe. If that setback is a bylaw, you know,
Yeah, well, I guess I'd suggest we have Peter get together with, town council and figure that out so that we're clear on it. It's your game, not mine, I'm just,
as far as what, the sign, the size of the sign?
no, whose responsibility, who makes the decision, who has the authority to make that decision? Does it have to go back to the ZBA, or are you folks entitled to make that decision?
We've already, I don't mean to speak over Mike, but we've already established that the units in the project complies with the
The
setback.
55.
No, I understand, I was only using that as an example. Okay, it's your game. I'm here as an observer, can't keep my mouth shut.
Any other discussion? Anything else? Any other comments from the public? We should close the public. We gotta close that?
No, you're gonna keep it open because we kept the utility and other discussions all under the same hearing.
Thank you.
But you can still make a motion on this part.
Okay. All right, so, anything else, any other comments, questions, or anything? Do we wanna kinda work to a motion to vote on these amended changes? Is everybody good? Do we have a motion then to accept, well, I'll let somebody else make the motion. Do we have a motion to accept these as proposed and per the letter from Attorney Campobasso?
Yeah, motion to accept the revisions to the layout dated 7/31/2023 as detailed in Attorney Campobasso's letter to HPDD dated August 18th, 2023.
Second.
All right, thank you. It's been seconded. Any discussion? So, hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? Hearing none, it's unanimous. These are granted
Thank you very
for this
much.
plan, these plans and the letter. All right. Next up would be, I'll let you keep going here, Attorney. The water line, you said, is there anything with the water line we need to discuss, or just the fact that it's done and it's over with?
I don't think that,
Just needs to be chlorinated.
there's a couple of follow-up things that will happen as construction progresses.
Yep.
If you drive through the site, which I did earlier before I came here, there still are some disturbed areas. The big push was to get the work done before school started. I think as the season gets better, they'll finish the whatever grading and seeding and things of that nature that have to take place. The line still needs to be chlorinated. The final connection of the water line actually into the site and the shut-off and turn-off valves have not been done yet because they're not up into the site far enough yet to do that. The main part was to run the line from the school property to the water line in Rutland Heights Drive, or Rutland Heights Way, excuse me, which has been completed. And the stub into the project is in the ground, they just don't have the valves in place yet. So, once that gets done, then the rest of the water line.
You work with the DPW with that and just, yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
That just kind of made me think about something though as you were talking. Per the original order of conditions, was there any timeframes in which Quinn Engineering was gonna go back and do any like, look at things or any inspections,
In the decision,
Do you recall?
I recall what the decision requires is, as the applicant completes phase one, we would notify the board. Quinn would then do their inspection,
At that point?
make sure that whatever needed to be done for phase one is completed, so that the applicant could then move to phase two. Once phase two was completed, same process.
Same process, beautiful.
Quinn goes out, does their inspections, comes back to the board, says, yes, they did everything, then we can move on to phase 3.
Alright, good. And just so the board knows too, the DPW didn't inspect the water line as they were doing it, so.
Yeah.
You know.
Chris, if I may, Weston and Sampson actually inspects our utilities, not
Okay.
Quinn.
Alright.
So, I've talked to Chris Kolosky extensively about this. He's overseen and discussed, and he said, you know what, these guys are doing a great job. I gotta tell you something, the town of Holden ought to come up and look at what they did and the patch they did on that road, and compare it to what's going on in their Main Street, because, I mean,
Why, you think there's something wrong in Holden?
I mean, you wouldn't barely know that they
They
cut the
destroyed
road
that
out.
road.
They did such a great job of
Mercy.
repairing it.
I'd rather be on a horse. Going down that. Okay. Alright, so the water line's good, and then let's discuss the site, electric utilities.
Yep, so, the National Grid, is sort of driving, the bus, if you will. Because obviously, whatever utilities go in have to be designed, approved by them. There's two aspects to it. I mean, obviously, within the site itself is not that difficult because it's gonna comply and it's being underground. It's just, going into the site, the proposal, there are separate plans that I think were provided to Mika yesterday. There's 3 different plan sets. One shows the plan set for the easement that would be required from Harmony Place within the development. And then there's a plan set that shows the easement that would be required from the IDIC because it has to run from
On that property is
Maple.
theirs, yeah.
Down Rutland Heights to the site. And the proposal is to locate above-ground poles. And the poles would be the same poles that are on the, depending on, if you're coming in off Maple, the light poles that are on the right-hand
Street lights
side,
on the right, yeah.
it's gonna be the same on the left.
See the telephone poles on the left side. And you guys all see the drawings here, you all saw that? Does anybody have any questions about what they're looking at and what you saw there with the poles and everything? That pole 27, I believe, is existing, Doug, right? That feeds the street lighting cabinet right there, it goes underground to that. So they wanna cut across the road and then run, I believe it's six poles, 7 poles up the road. And then that's where the last pole would be, and then it goes underground from that pole into the development. So again, that's about maybe 50 feet away, from the development entrance to that last pole.
I'm sorry, but I don't like it. Therefore, I will not vote on it that way. Period. Sick and tired. As a matter of fact, how about getting Eversource in here maybe? Or somebody else that'll do this town better than National Grid.
So there's a couple
Fortunately,
of,
there's no selectmen on here.
there's a couple of
Chew 'em out.
issues that I think are driving the poles to be above ground. The big concern is a lot of the area that's there are wetlands, but it's also the reservoir district that's on this side where Wes is pointing. And the type of work that would need to be done to put utilities underground would be significant and costly. The cost is probably 2.5, almost 3 times the expense to run it that way. And the exact location, either in the roadway width or not on the roadway width, the site and the issues that would have to be taken into consideration make underground a lot more difficult and a lot more costly. And I think that's one of the reasons why the discussions have taken so long to get them to actually come up with this plan. I understand, the concern, but I think the way it's been discussed and the way it's proposed, the above-ground line would strictly be on that side of the street. And hopefully, that can be approved. Because National Grid, as I said, they are driving the bus, if you will. And sometimes it is frustrating to deal with them. But under the circumstances, that aside, the work that would have to be done in order to put these utilities underground is significant.
To Chris, oh, go ahead, never mind.
I have a question, and I'm not sure if it's reasonable. It looks like it's because of those wetlands right there that they wanna have it on a pole versus underground, correct?
Correct.
The wetlands, like kind of where would it be possible to split it and put them underground, like up that first part, and then put like just a couple of overhead poles to avoid the wetland? Or is that not feasible? I think to do something like that.
So I think right now, what we're dealing with is, in the decision, the way it's worded right now, condition 13, all electrical power and communication, underground and/or overhead utilities shall be installed as per applicable utility company specifications and/or engineered specific drawings. So
So we're just taking what they gave us basically, is what you're saying? Correct. Got it.
Where's the school electricity come from?
It comes down the roadway from Naquag, and just before,
Underground or over?
well, it's overhead, when it goes through Naquag down that road off of Main Street, it's all overhead, Dick, goes by the ball field behind Naquag,
Yeah.
and then the straightaway, it goes down there. And just before you get to the softball field where it opens up,
Yeah.
there's a pole right there, and it goes underground around the field, and the transformer is on that, on the, like the first base side of that ball field right there, just on the corner of Central Tree School. And that's where that primary line, so that comes off that pole right there.
Is there enough that can be continued on from there? What size line is it?
I have no idea, if the capacity is there to do what these, what these folks need here.
We had National Grid look at that, cause we wanted it in that direction. They said there's not enough there to
Not
be able
enough.
to run from it. We wanted that.
they have been working on this for quite some time. We're talking like several months, in excess of like 7 months, that this has been going back and forth. And just to get the initial response from National Grid is a challenge. And hopefully there's no National Grid members in the audience. So
No, just
But Tim has
Eversource.
Tim has his hand.
we've tried different locations, and this is what we're being told is the best way to go about it.
Tim works for
Yeah.
Eversource.
Yeah, any other questions?
No, I just, it's interesting that when the state did it, they had no problem putting it underground all the way up
Yeah.
the street. As soon as we do it, we can't do it because of environmental issues and
Yeah,
all those other things.
I mean, to that point, attorney, I'm not sure I completely agree with that. I when we did the power to the Solomon Pond Mall, we did all that, and we went right over the bridge. There's a bridge right after the Olive Garden. The pipes are exposed and fiberglass duct. Then we go back underground. We do it all the time. I believe it's, and as far as I understand, underground overhead, it's really upon your direction. They don't really dictate whether it's above ground or underground. That's based on the applicant's direction,
Okay.
most of the times. And then there are certain situations, but I mean, geez, I did a building right in Winthrop on the ocean, right overlooking, right across the Boston Bay to the airport, and we put the transformer, it was about 10 feet from the ocean. So but you had oil containment and things like that, so they do get close to wetlands. This is just stricter things. And again, to what Michelle said, going up overhead, at the river there, the stream, the wet area there, that's a possibility. Personally, just to give you my opinion, I'm kind of indifferent to it because it doesn't, they're underground in the subdivision, which is obviously the only way you do that anyways. Coming up that road there, is it, it's hard to say what the future will be for that area of the town, and that's the point of view I want you to know, I'm looking at it partially as well. Probably most importantly, I'm looking at it, what will that be? Will it be an industrial park, or will it be, what is it gonna be? I really don't know, we don't know. We know what it can be within a few different things, and so that's the way I'm looking at it, is if, is it gonna be another 55 and over, is it gonna be a industrial, or is it gonna be a town recreation or a town facility? That's really the only things it can be, correct, per the bylaws. And are those overhead lines fitting with that environment for the town down the line? So that's the question for me, and I'm indifferent to it, but that's me, looks are not my concern, I'll just be perfectly honest here, I'm just a purpose-minded person. If it has a good reason, then it's fine, and that's just the way I make decisions, and I do it. So that's my opinion of it. I just wanted to express that to the board and everybody, but we're all entitled to those things, we're all entitled to our own comments, and I'll pretty much back the board on whatever you guys wanna do, but I'm indifferent to it.
In the planning board, I told them, be around in 75 years, and how many times have National Grid come in and cut the trees out of the lines and everything else? They don't. They're worse bunch of jerks around, for crying out loud. In this town, it's terrible. And I told the selectmen that, I don't know how many times, for crying out loud, and when are you gonna get,
Yeah,
so that's why I feel that underground, you don't have to worry about it, it's done. Out of mind.
Underground's better, and do we take the approach that, this whole Heights area is a new subdivision? And does that industrial subdivision fall under our, subdivision bylaws? And I'll look to you, and, Tim's on the line too, we'll get to him in a minute, but, I don't know how, I'm not familiar enough with those bylaws to know if they're just residential based, or if that's more of a broader industrial park. If someone's to build an industrial park, knowing we do all industrial parks, everything's underground. Nobody puts anything overhead anymore. And quite honestly, I just assumed it was cheaper because we never do it overhead. It's just never done. And I know when Randy put the digester in up there, it's unbelievable. He was almost $1 million to bring the power down just from the substation right up the road. And so it's usually never, I just thought we do it so often that it was just cost effective to go underground, and just assume that's the way you were gonna go, to be honest with you.
So technically, under the subdivision regulations, under the design standards, it's falls under section 6 subsection B. It does say underground utilities, all utilities within a subdivision shall be placed underground. So they are doing that. It goes on to say adequate provisions for street lighting shall be made where underground electrical services provided. So we're kind of caught between a rock and a hard place, because Rutland Heights really isn't within, it's a town way, it's not within the subdivision. So they are complying, it's just that now we've got to run, because of the way the power had to come into the site. It's not the preferred way, it's just a way that can come in. But based on the work that we have done to date, I can tell you that if it had to go underground from Maple up to the site, it's extremely costly.
Any other comments from the board or questions for what we've heard? Jim, go ahead.
In Tamika's letter dated August 23rd, in the second paragraph,
That's the letter from the planning board.
yeah, that the planning board strongly recommends that they remain underground as originally proposed. So what's the as originally proposed? What's the background for that?
And that's why I pointed out in.
He's got it there that it's either or in the
Well,
order of
it's
conditions.
not really either or, it basically says, just give me a second and I'll find it.
I don't know where they got that as proposed, because
Well,
honestly,
I
in my
think-
recollection,
Because I remember as a board, you were laying it out strong. And I thought that was the way it was gonna be, laid out, period.
yeah,
And,
specifically when we talked about this actual site plan,
Yes.
you know, cause keep in mind, the site plan was not the roadway coming up. So even, you know, the site plan we approved is within there.
Include the area along.
On the drawing, it says UG, underground. All the way from Maple, it says UG.
Should include the area along.
It shows
It's in this,
the
it's in this
existing
packet right here.
underground.
That
Where's
one.
that?
That's for the lighting.
Right, that's the existing.
Yeah, on the right side is the existing underground lighting.
These new lines are gonna be on the left side.
So read that last
Why,
part.
why do they have to be on the left side? I'm confused with grid on that, because if you can go underground on the right side, what's the difference? Why can't you go behind a pole lighting? It's been done before in Worcester, it's been done before in other places. I'm confused.
The only reason why I think they might, and I'm just speculating at this, Tim, okay? Again, if the applicant hasn't requested a specific side of the road, if you're putting, you know, something like that, the way the poles turn and go up the hill, and they have to guide them off, if you start on the left side and you come up and then you go up the hill, it's a little easier rather than coming from the right side and then making a harder cutback. There's more pull on that pole that's in the Y. I believe it's pole 6. I mean, just if I was the guy setting the poles and doing the work, I'd wanna be coming as straight as possible. So I'm assuming that's maybe the way, the reason why they did it. Just from an installation point of view, yeah, it's pole 6. So if you look at the drawing here, pole 6, it angles back up the road to pole 7. So if you're coming from the other side of the road, that's a more of acute angle, and you have more stress on that pole pulling it across the roadway. So, I don't know, but that's all I can suggest.
Also,
Chris-
on the two.
Chris, what I was saying was, if they went behind the poles that are in existence for underground, which grid does that all the time over gas, water, and sewer. They do that all the time. I'm confused why they couldn't, since they've got an easement off the road, just follow the lighting poles all the way up and then cross the road.
Excuse me one second, Tim. Those are not their poles. Those are town-owned poles. There is a meter. So right across from Doug's house, there's a pole on the other side of the plant, pole 27. And that is a National Grid pole, but then there's an electric service off of that pole that the town pays for that lighting. So those are not National Grid, and I don't believe, I'm not aware of any easement there. See that control cabinet right to your left there, right there? Yep.
Yeah.
So there's a meter on that, so that's not, those are not, those poles are not owned. I know they look like the regular street poles like in the city, right? You know, but I believe those are owned by the town, and they were put in under the contract with Griffin Electric. When they did all the demo up at the Heights, they put that in, and I believe the town pays for that meter. That was my understanding way back, was that like 04 or 94 or something, whatever that was, whenever they demoed that all out, did all the demo and abatement up there. Anyways.
But again, there's an easement off of the road that they can easily use where those lighting poles are. It's not difficult. So I'm struggling because Grid physically told me, because I'm working in Worcester, like, you know, Chris, with some of your jobs and Murphy, that poles are not being put in on any National Grid service. Everything is underground. So I have to do everything underground now. I can't set poles anymore. So I'm really confused why in Rutland, which is in Worcester County, that this job has to have poles. And you know where some of my cabinets are. They ain't in the most beautiful places, and I've still got to do underground. If it's a new place. So specifically like Salisbury Street and stuff like that, where there's poles already that I could come off. Nope, it's got to be underground service. So I'm confused with Grid because I'm on my horse, but I pay 34 cents a kilowatt hour in the winter. I think they can come up with a budget to put this in, because Attorney Campasso, you might tell me, are you guys paying for this service coming in from the street, or is that handled by Grid under their budget?
No, I
the applicant's
I
paying for
believe
this.
the applicant is gonna be responsible to run the entire thing.
And it's so expensive that we would have to reconsider certain amenities. We just simply couldn't absorb.
So
the
it's not National Grid that's gonna actually do the work. The way they have worded it is they just want the municipality to provide the necessary easement, and then the applicant will be responsible to run from Maple up to the site.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
I
Well,
wouldn't mind
guess we are-
underground until you got to that, where the trees are down there, and then go up a tree and go straight across. You know, in a straight line, and then drop in, you're almost right there near your driveway anyways.
only thing the RDIC.
Any pulling.
Have you guys done an analysis of cost of both ways?
Yes.
Just curious, would you mind just sharing roughly what those, I'm just kinda curious what they're charging for
As,
the overhead.
as proposed, I think it's a little more than 100,000. If we have to do the underground, it's probably gonna be like 270, 280.
Okay.
And that's based on, you know, educated estimates.
One thing, if we're going overhead, and the one thing we're gonna be careful of, and I'm gonna bring this up to Mike and the RDIC board members here, is that if they're designing this just for a single-phase residential load up there, if there was any industrial buildings going in here, this overhead system is not gonna be designed for a three-phase feed to an industrial building.
Correct.
And so therefore, there's, you know, something would have to, one second, so therefore, you know, poles and wiring would have to be redone for another future person. So
Chris, you took the words right out of my mouth.
I don't know that if, you know, obviously going underground with 4-inch ducts, you know, there's room to do three-phase, single-phase, whatever you wanna do. And, you know, I'm not sure if this, you know, I don't know where that cost lies of that delta, that difference. But I think most people would agree that being underground is the best installation for everybody, including the, you know, the 140 units on the hill, you know, that keeps the power out of the, you know, away from the trees from being ripped down. You know, the storms we have in Rutland, I mean, yeah, you'll see this winter. It's no fun framing in the winter here. But having this underground, and if there's a cost difference, then maybe there should be discussion between the RDIC and the applicant. I'm just putting this out there. I don't know if that's been discussed at all. If that, you know, where the town's responsibility lies and where the applicant's responsibility lies, you know, I don't know. But if that's just a single phase, one cable going up that street, those poles are probably not gonna be strong enough to run set three-phase transformers on them and all that other stuff. So now, everything they're doing is gonna have to get ripped down and redone again. And that to me just sounds ridiculous. In the
Chris,
wide general world scheme of things. Now, to you, you just want your power on so you can sell some units, and that I can respect as well. But you know, that charge is to do the best thing for the town as well as you and everybody. So trying to find that common ground, attorney, is where my mind is right now. And I'm just thinking out loud, I'm just talking out loud. I'm not saying anything should go any way, but I'm just trying to pull it all together in my head right now and, you know, kinda put it where it's at.
Hey, Chris, I had one more question, and this is probably for Attorney Camasso, is because they're paying to put it in, is that then Harbor, or I'm sorry, is
Classic
it
Harbor
your-
Arms, yep.
Yeah, is it your poles and your line then that you're responsible for maintenance and everything?
No.
No, so that's the part that's interesting is
That's what I'm getting at.
yeah, it's gonna actually be the town.
Right.
Yeah.
Going forward, because it's all.
Well, National Grid is responsible for
And
it.
I have to, I don't know exactly how it would work because it's RDIC land. It's not like it's a roadway that the town, because my understanding is the poles are on the RDIC land. They're not in the right-of-way roadway width.
Oh, we need to fix that. We gotta fix that.
Yeah, usually they should be.
How far off the street are they? And what's the right of way? What's the distance from the center?
It's the right of way, I mean, that was a state designed road, so I believe that right of way's easily 50 feet, and I think it may even be 75.
I don't know
Yeah,
what the,
to Mike's point, it should be typically the state roads are 25 off center line on each side.
Yeah.
What choose it
Rutland
is,
Heights Way is 50 feet wide.
And how, does anybody know how actually wide that asphalt curb to curb is?
Well, the problem is the asphalt's not centered in the street.
Oh, true, Wes, yeah. Good point.
It's pushed to one side, and so the asphalt is 24 feet wide. But like I said, the issue is on the left-hand side, it hugs the left-hand side as you're coming up Rutland Heights way to the project. And on the right-hand side is where the existing electric line is and the the light poles are.
So that even West, that even pushes it more to be on the right side, because then it'd be in the right of way. On the left side, the town of, and RDIC owns it, to me, that's crazy. That means we'd be responsible for line maintenance, pole maintenance.
No, not necessarily. No, I don't agree with
No,
that, Tim.
because you're,
Create easements.
either the town.
Just give them the easement.
The town or the IDIC, the town of Rutland, or
Or the
more than
IDIC, or
likely,
both.
the town of Rutland will have to grant
The easement.
an easement to National Grid.
And that easement would be in perpetuity to anybody that developed that land or bought that land
Because
off the town or IDIC.
both plans do have in the title block,
Because even
easement location.
if I'm building it, for instance, if I'm putting a building, let's just say I go to build an industrial building on that lot on the right behind Bill's, okay? When I put that green transformer next to my building, 10 feet off the building, I have to give National Grid, Irrational Grid, an easement to go underground to that transformer and to set that transformer. So whether it's personal property, town property, whatever, it's you know, they can get the easement to do that. But regardless, you know, I wish there was a way we could figure out a way to get this underground for the benefit of everybody. Have three-phase up that road for the benefit of the Heights property, and, you know, give these guys better service long-term, give the future people of that development or whatever, if I'm not using the right word, I don't wanna use that, be careful using that word development, because it means certain things. I'm not trying to imply that it should be underground or anything, but just for the future build-out of that area that's underground, and that's, you know, it's attractive and it's professional, and I don't know, it's the right way to go, but sometimes that's not always the way to go, right, so.
I guess I still don't understand why the proposed feed is on the left side of the road, if what Wes says is the roadway is on the left of the easement now.
Yeah, but that would be a 1-foot easement on the right side, and I can guarantee you, they would not put poles in a 1-foot area.
No, but if what Wes said is the road is on the left side of the easement, which means there's more of an easement on the right side right now.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
Wes
but
must be able to tell us that.
But the poles would then interfere with the lights.
Honestly, I think it's the approach going up the hill. I think that's the only reason why the town put it there. They're gonna need, they're not looking at it from where they have an easement or where the town road easement is. They're gonna need all new easements to put that in there anyways. And they're gonna get on his property, the easement from him, and all that work, their lawyers, trust me, are gonna get all new easements for everything. Even if there's something there, they're gonna want a new easement. Just the fact that their truck is 8 foot wide and it's gonna be off that curbing, they're gonna want a 10, 15-foot easement off the road. So I don't care what your easement is right now, if you ain't got enough room for those guys to drive all their equipment on their property, they want that whole, like your easement going into that part the guy was describing, right? You know, your duck bank's this big, but they want enough to drive their truck on there and do everything so that you can never, you know, hey, your truck hit my car, too bad, you know, too bad. You know, your truck wrecked my curbing, too bad, I've got an easement to go on there with it. So it's a bulletproof easement, and I don't see that being a major issue at this point right now. I think that's something we can figure out and work through. I'm just trying to figure out right now what's the best way to run this up the hill and how to get it there, and, you know, quite honestly, what responsibility is the applicants, and is there any responsibility of the town?
Are there poles going down, Forest Hill Drive, or is that underground?
I think that's poles, that's pretty old, I don't think that's underground. You know,
Well, what are they doing on Forest Hill Drive?
No, I'm just trying to think, I mean, if we wanted to come off.
Oh, they have poles on Forest Hill Drive, I didn't know if you were doing.
No, I'm just thinking if it was a large enough line, because it would take nothing at all just to go right across and right in front of their entrance. Forest Hill.
You know, and the other consideration, obviously, is, as I said, they do wanna start pulling building permits, to start construction, so if we really spend too much time trying to figure out, you know, obviously, we did take into consideration that this is really either the RDIC land or the town land. It's not really the applicant's land. There were difficulties getting power to the site because of the site. But that said, based on the work that they have put into this, a lot of what's driving this is National Grid and the expense. There will be some benefit to the town, probably not to the extent. I would imagine if there were other uses that were actually in place right now, maybe this
That
might
would be ideal.
that might be a bigger debate, because you don't know what's gonna be on
You don't.
the right-hand side, and you don't know what's gonna be on the left. What I can tell you, based on my recollection from, and I'll be quick,
Yeah, that's okay.
just on my recollection from the Heights redevelopment plan that the state sort of imposed way back when, there was supposed to be a mix of residential units, industrial units, and some type of,
Town,
exactly. So,
whether that's a new post office or.
whether that's gonna
reuse center
actually
or
happen or
park.
not, we don't know.
No, we don't.
But, this is really the first thing that's been viable, up there, and again, in the decision itself, the way the condition is worded right now, it does provide for either underground or overhead lines. So, it's not that we're, not taking we knew this was gonna be, an issue. It's not like we weren't, taking that into consideration.
Could that didn't come earlier then? Because honestly, Mike, I think that the town should take part of their money that they paid, and we should put in that line down to the cutoff or wherever, underground. Or, the town of Rutland or RDIC or whoever you wanna call it. Should put and pay for it.
Chris, through the chairman, the other thing I wanted to point out is, we're just talking about power right now, but cable and telephone's gonna just jump on those overheads too.
Correct.
It's not just gonna be one, it's gonna be three.
Yep.
I wanted to point that out. That hadn't been talked about yet.
Yeah, no, you're right, Tim, and, yeah.
As I recall, when we were talking to another suitor years ago,
Yeah.
there was wasn't there a provision put in there that anyone who built on the property after that would
Within those
repay the original
See how it's underground?
part of the
What was
cost,
there?
like to split up the cost. So
Nobody's gonna
whoever
know
was
here.
putting it in, we said, you're gonna pay for the utilities to go in, but anyone coming in after you, it would be stipulated that they have to reimburse you for a share of the utility work.
Solar project.
Yes, well, and actually another project, not just the solar project, but another project was the same thing we talked to when we were talking to Barton, was the same thing. Was that whoever goes in first is gonna absorb all this cost, but then they would get reimbursed by any later development. Which I think would include if we decide, I might be speaking out of turn, but I wanna be sure. So if, say, at some point, we decide that part of that's not buildable at all and we make it into a park or something, then that would become Rutland property, then Rutland would have to pay the share for that parcel. Would that,
It's a timeline.
I don't know, I haven't thought about this a long time.
okay,
Does anybody know what is there any type of existing conditions or an as-built plan that, where the town knows what type of conduit's in the ground right now for those poles that exist?
Well, those streetlights just have like 1.25 inch, 1-inch pipe, and they're just 277 480 volts. They're not, it's not a primary line or anything like that,
So
no.
it wouldn't be
It's
any,
just look at those as a parking lot lighting that would be in a Walmart parking lot.
So they
just a
can't
little pipe.
upgrade that.
so they can't
never
upgrade
done.
those or.
That's a 30 amp circuit,
and
50 amp
have
circuit.
it, and have it serve multiple.
Yeah, that wouldn't run one unit up there, yeah.
I was just thinking if if it was a 4-inch or 6.
Yeah, it'd be nice, you could have a duct yeah.
We ductwork for.
But then, underground, you're gonna have your communication, as well, and all that, and the handholds for that one, you know, and again, you know, I mean, just thinking about this, I'm sitting there thinking, as you guys are talking, there's also two other ways to feed those lower parcels, right off of 56. I mean, right now, there's that pole 27 on the corner, where if that one parcel behind Bill's was one development, you know, you could just have
One little zip in
they
there.
just set another pole right there for a three-phase feed, and you go underground to your transformer, and that would just be fed off 56. And then whatever was done on the other side, if that's a park or a wellness, you know, a community center, whatever that thing may be someday, again, you could come off you know, further down from you, Doug, you know, you could cut across the road, set another pole right there in the middle of that lot, and away you go underground. So that Rutland Heights Way, if that's the correct name of that road, it's not, that's not the only way to feed those parcels.
Got it.
Cause they got 56 frontage.
Yeah.
Right now as the two individuals. Now, if there was, obviously, if they get cut up, then your Heights Way is the way to get to them.
Yeah.
So,
That transformer is, that's from original, when the hospital was there. Oh,
They took down that whole station.
Yeah.
It was closer up in front of
yeah,
Highland
I
Park.
remember.
It was all fenced in and all wired in.
the whole
and-
substation
yeah.
for itself,
It was, yeah, the whole substation.
well,
Alright, I like your idea.
what was my idea?
Well,
Clue me in.
the only concern I have is, I'll put on a selectman's hat, but I can see a pole, I mean, I've had poles in front of my house fall down across Maple Ave, wipe out all the lines, do whatever. And I could see that happening up there in Rutland Heights, and all of a sudden, there's no power up in the, you know, people haven't got power up here, and people are pounding on the thing, you know, I pay taxes, where's my, you know, what are you selectmen doing, why aren't you fixing the roads, why aren't you doing that? And then, just coming up with the fact, well, we thought about it, but, you know, we didn't really think it was something that was gonna be, in our lifetime happening.
And, you know, just to take on that, Doug, I mean, you know, this is an open RDIC meeting right now, so with Michelle, Dick, Tim online still, and Mike here, I mean, I'm gonna just throw this back to you guys for a minute. If you feel like you wanna have a discussion right now about this issue that, you know, does the town have any responsibility in increasing this or building a better network structure going up through that road?
We're just gonna talk.
Sure, no problem, guys, no problem. They're gonna have a little
guys can
RDIC
talk,
talk, yeah.
And then we can go have a coffee or something.
So, you know, I don't know. I don't know what the appetite or what the financial ability of the town or the RDIC has, or, you know, how long will that take? I mean, if we, you know, if that's something that you gotta go to a town meeting and get voted on next May, you know, that's a long ways out for these guys that wanna be putting power in units in a few months.
I just wanted to clarify on Dick's comment earlier about using the proceeds from this sale for that. So the proceeds from the sale of this property went into a special type of account, as stipulated by MGL, and you can only use those funds for purposes for which you would have borrowed for 5 years or longer. So I don't know that would qualify as that expense.
Probably right.
And any funds that come out of that account have to be appropriated at a town meeting.
Okay, so let me just say this much, so, what was this, a little over a million?
I'm sorry.
1.6.
1.6, right? We bought this for a half, right? So there's a net
1.65
1.1. You got a net 1.1, roughly, at least 1 million. So what happens, so that money can't, you know, that 5 year, that payoff is paid off, like what's the 5 year?
So it's, so you can't, you have to use the money for things that, so pretend you didn't have the money.
Yeah.
Anything that you would have had to have borrowed money to do
Like a fire truck
for
or?
more than, right, for more than 5 years, you can use that money for that type of thing. But you couldn't use it to buy like new chairs for the library because you wouldn't have borrowed money to
Sure,
do
sure,
that.
I
Does that
understand.
make sense? So it
Yeah, no,
doesn't
that
actually
makes
have
much
anything
better
to
sense,
do
yeah,
with
thank you.
an actual loan.
Chris, but we could argue the point that putting in an electric service, you could easily come up with a 5-year, you know, for $270,000, we're taking out a 5-year loan to cover that construction cost. Me personally, I could justify that.
And again, you're talking the delta, I'm assuming that,
But yeah,
you know,
it would be
the.
170.
Yeah, just for talking purposes, and again, I'm not sure exactly these numbers, they said 270 to 100, so there's a delta of 170, so just in talking things here, if the town was to pay for that delta of 170 to put the infrastructure up the roadway underground, is that something the RDIC board would be behind to go to the town and get appropriated? But again, that would take until next May.
And
Is there a special town permit this fall?
so there is gonna be a
Too late.
special town meeting in November. The only thing is, if the town votes it down, then you're out of luck.
Yeah. You're going ahead, for sure then.
I think you have better luck at the special town meeting in the fall than you do at the
Good point, Michelle.
May meeting.
Good point, yeah.
We'd have much better luck at
We are gonna
this.
have a special town meeting in November.
Yeah, and I think it would be way easier to get it done then than to get it done in the spring anyway.
Attorney, do you have any comments?
Well, just a couple of things.
Sure.
And, my thinking would be, depending on how adamant the board is, it would seem to make sense that in a project like this, okay, if it had to be done so that it was analyzed, let's say you could make the improvements on the right-hand side of the road. Have the town make the improvements. So that cost obviously would be undertaken by the town right now. But if somebody else comes in later on and says, okay, now that those houses are there, we wanna put something over here on. I think the way the Rutland Heights reuse plan was designed, I remember there being like three distinct locations. There was like a lot A, a lot B, and a lot C. I don't know exactly where they were configured, but let's say Harmony Place is taking up lot A.
Sure.
Well, somebody comes down to the town next year or 5 years from now and says, hey, we wanna propose something on parcel B. Okay, well, we had to spend $200,000 to upgrade the power. Sure, come on in, but you gotta reimburse us, half that cost.
And that's what Michelle was actually talking about, I think, either before or after you
but
left.
You're just
but
saying
to her-
shifting the cost to us instead of to them.
Right, because to her point,
Yep.
I don't want this to come across the wrong way,
Understood.
but,
What if nothing ever gets built?
okay, so
Thank you.
it's taken, quite a while for this project to be viable for the town. I know Ron and Laurel plan on being around for, the
So you don't wanna be a bank?
foreseeable
huh? You
future.
don't wanna be a bank?
But
Really not.
depending on how long it could
Unknown
take-
interest rates?
I think the town will be here much longer than probably myself and them would be. So, but that would be the compromise. And then the other strong consideration is obviously time. It's gonna be time consuming to go back and forth with National Grid. And it's very likely that if this were to go much past, say November, middle of November, road cuts, curb cuts, all that stuff become, now we're looking at, instead of this year, we're looking at sometime next year.
More time, do we?
No.
No, but you can't cut into a street, Massachusetts law, after November 15th, is it?
Yeah, it is
In the
November
public way.
15th.
That's a state law.
Pretty sure it is.
I just wish we had, and please don't take this the wrong way, I wish we had a written estimate of what these costs really are. I mean, in all my ignorance, and Ron, you can blow me out of the water in about a half a second on this. I look at the excavators you got up there, I gotta believe you can dig from 56 to the top of that hill in 2 days. You could have a trench 4 feet deep all the way up there. I have no idea what the pipe costs, but it can't be hundreds of thousands of dollars. It just seems $270,000 just sounds like a
So
astronomical.
there's actually 4 PVC pipes.
Well, sure, okay, fine, but I mean,
But
Chris, what does PVC pipe cost? You must know.
Yeah, no, it's 4 inches, $650 a foot right now, Schedule 40. And honestly, I mean, I'll just be flat out honest with you. I just finished up at St. John's High School, okay? We put a 400 feet, we just relocated their utilities in the back of their property to underground. So they had poles, and we took it down, so there's a potential of a new facility going up right where those poles are, okay? So we want to get them out of the way this year. So putting in the underground power and communication duct banks, and this was in the roadway, so there is patching and asphalt that was done. It was $425,000 to do 400 feet of, 500 feet of trench. But however, there was some stormwater work with that, there was some sewer manholes, there was some sewer drains. So realistically speaking, you know, the 270 does not sound too far out of whack to go that distance.
And
I
this
don't know
is-
what that total distance is, but it's gotta be
This
close
is
to
the
1,000
other thing that,
feet.
there's always a constant struggle with developers that wanna propose something within a community, any community, with boards and municipalities that have to struggle with infrastructure, and with residents who may like or dislike certain things. The reality is, when it comes to this type of a project, economic viability is very important.
Absolutely.
Depending on where you are and depending on what your product is, you know, they could build the most aesthetically, you know, pleasing development, and propose it. Whether or not they could actually construct it, finance it, and actually sell it and make money, is quite a different thing. And, you know, you're always going to experience some type of bumps along the way, if you will. You know, they're starting to experience a couple of those. Obviously, the water line was something that was not anticipated. That was an expense, not as significant as we're talking here. But I can tell you that these utility lines will be quite an expense. And we have to strike that balance. They want to propose a development that will be an attractive development for 55 and older. Those projects are not easy to sell in any community because of the age restriction. You limit your marketplace right away. But I understand the struggle. I think that the end result, the poles and the lighting and the cable, it won't be that aesthetically unpleasing. And I know the concerns about the trees and what have you, because that's a reality. I just know that this is what they've determined is their best option, is to do it this way.
And
Chris,
one second, Tim, 1 second. And Attorney, I just want you to know, I totally understand your point of view. I totally respect that. The one thing I would just like to point out is that as part of buying property and developing property, we all have to do our due diligence on how we're getting our utilities there. And, you know, there was time for that thought process and due diligence and expectations of how that would be, regardless whether it was above or underground. So, you know, from a cost point of view and all those things, you know, those things, you know, you have your site engineers, these people should have led you guys in the right direction there, with all due respect, you know,
Okay. No, I
to the cost of
I
things. But-
understand.
But you know, this board's very willing to work with you guys, but yet we still have a charge to do the best thing for the town as well. And, you know, now you guys are here, you're part of this town, and, you know, no one's ever gonna kick anybody to the curb or anything like that. I've said it before, I'm indifferent to those polls. You know, again, I don't live across the street from them, but you do. But in general, so I just kind of want to get the conversation back here to where does this board stand with these polls? Is it a problem? Is it something we're gonna, you know, we don't have a problem with? And if it is a problem, you know, do we want to just table this so the RDIC and the town and the applicant can maybe possibly, you know, I mean, what they propose is the town paying for this and then back charging people, you know, associatedly, you know, whatever. I mean, that could be a possibility. I don't know, but I just want the board's opinion right now before we talk to anybody in the public. I want the board's opinion before we go to the public. Tim had his hands up. I just want to get a feel from us five right here. Where do we stand as a group right now?
We have a question back there that.
Yeah, but he was asking us.
I'm asking this board right now where our opinion is on the poles just being overhead or the power being underground. Where are we set on that issue right now?
I'm underground, period,
You're underground?
and I don't mind other people hop on the
Does it
peg.
matter to you? Do you prefer
Yes,
one of the?
well, it matters. I've looked at our charge and our regulations, and I think we're in charge of the property, from reading our bylaws, it's not a subdivision. It says that we approve what's legal in town. And as near as I can tell, above ground poles along roads is okay. in town, therefore I think I would vote to approve it. But even though I think underground makes a lot of sense for what we've discussed for the
Sure.
long term of the project, I think our charge is to approve it because it meets laws and regulations.
Okay.
Unless the whole property is considered a subdivision, which I don't think it is.
I know, I kinda look at that and I struggle with that, you know, I mean, it's an existing roadway, it's not a new subdivision. It's
a
kinda,
roadway.
it's
And-
tough, and I had mentioned that before, Jim, it's kinda difficult there, you know?
Reading, just to continue
Yeah,
forward
yeah,
on
go ahead.
reading what was summarized from the planning board discussion, it said, it more or less says that they feel it should
Should be underground.
follow what the subdivision rules are.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah, no, I mean, you can't argue with that, but but is this a subdivision up the roadway? You know, they're, in the subdivision, they're meeting those regulations within their subdivision. You know, but but bringing power up an existing road that doesn't have it, you're not creating a subdivision.
yeah,
That's an existing road. That's not a new subdivision, so I'm struggling with that portion being, you know, a subdivision, you know? Doug?
Yeah, obviously I'd like to see them in the ground, but I guess I agree that, I think probably a bigger charge is to get the RDIC to go back and look at how we're gonna feed lot number B. All right, and if they gotta take some of their money out of their fund or whatever, be it $300,000 or whatever, that's part of developing this parcel of land that we have. And they can come in later and put in their underground for the lot A and lot C and whatever. I do feel concerned about the poles, because I know coming along that back corner, when you go by the rose garden and you come over the dam and there's a pretty big dip there and there's not a lot of stuff there, so you're either gonna have to a lot, you know, pretty large poles, or, you know, I'm just concerned that they're gonna be there for a long time, but I think it would be not our charge to stop them from doing it with the poles now, because again, it's not something that has was stated that they are things that
Yeah,
are used.
Jim framed it very simply,
Yeah,
and
so I think I would be in favor of giving them the poles and letting them move forward. And I would hope that the RDIC would go back and look at what they wanna do with the rest of because I mean, coming up that right side may not be the way, you know, to do both parcels or whatever they need to do. But I think they need to look at it and take some of the money that's possibly out there to
and again, feeding those two parcels, that B and C, as we discussed, you know, the A, B, and the C, off of 56 is still a viable solution.
absolutely.
So.
But again, that's what they should
These
look
folks
at.
putting these poles or underground, whatever, up the road, they could be the only one on that circuit going up that road.
That's
in the
right.
future. We just don't know. Nobody knows, you know? Michelle, anything else, Doug?
Nope.
Michelle?
I think we should pursue doing underground with the RDIC, not necessarily. It's harder to go back and do it. Once it's done overhead, it's gonna be hard to go back and do it underground. But I'm having a hard time with it. Cause I think it should be underground aesthetically and I think it's the right thing for the property, but I struggle with, I don't know that they should bear the brunt of the price difference.
Yeah, no, okay. 1 second, Peter. Tim, did you have a comment first?
Yeah, I just was gonna, and it was more what you said, Chris, is I remember these discussions, or, you know, part of the discussions at the earliest when you guys were going through your preliminary of, you know, duck banks that might have to go in the middle of roads and all that stuff. So my thought process was Harmony or Harbor at the time had already done the preliminary costs for underground. So I guess I'm sort of what your expense. I'm not being a smart aleck or anything, but I would have guessed that 270,000 would have been part of the development costs that had already been taken into account. It's my opinion.
Okay. Peter Crane.
Yeah, Peter Crane, Chair of the Conservation Commission. I would like to point out that the regulatory filing to put in underground utilities will be a fascinating experience between Conservation Commission and DCR, both of which need regulatory approval. For any work that needs to be done, putting in poles is a very easy regulatory process. Probably just an RDA for Concom, I can't tell you what the DCR would require. But to dig up and trench all along the road with the steepness heading directly into wetlands, that's a Concom notice of intent, and that's time and not a lot more money, but it's time and money. In addition,
Yeah, the money's in the time more than your expenses, hey,
Yeah.
hey, yeah.
so I
That's a
just
good
wanted to
point,
point
Peter.
out, that
a
is
good point.
an element, in my opinion, that favors putting in poles instead. But it's not, I'm not suggesting it's the overriding element.
Sure, no, it's a great point, though. As the applicants have stated, time is of the essence with them. Getting this project, powered up so they can sell units. And they're under the gun by the agreement with the town to sell units, so it's just kinda, not like being hogtied and told to run, Boy, that's been in that situation a few times myself. It's not a lot of fun.
About half and
Mike,
half.
I'd like to get your opinion on this and where you, after hearing all this information and all the different things, where do you stand?
I wish I was home with my family and watching TV.
Tell me about it.
Expect my phone.
Well, I do agree with what Tim said. I do believe that from day one, there's always been an understanding, or the discussions were always that this was gonna be underground. Because I remember you specifically talking about, we didn't have to worry, your committee didn't have to worry about the design of the utilities, because that would all be handled by National Grid. Their design group would determine what that all had to be. So I don't think there's any question about that, and how we got to where we are now from a cost delta, I don't know. I don't think it's reasonable to think you're gonna get the town involved in any kind of a timely fashion that's gonna resolve this building season. I just think that's very impractical. So as much as I think they should be underground, I would guess I would agree with most of what you folks have said, that overground seems at this point to be the only legitimate option to keep this project moving. And the harm to it, what's the harm? That, when trees come down, 142 units is gonna lose power.
Yeah.
But I mean, I know
Happens every
someone on
year,
that
every-
board that lives
all over
kinda
the
close to me, and we both have generators, cause we lose power constantly, so.
Not the hill.
I don't know whether that helps or not, but.
Yeah, not the hill to die on.
The one concern I have too, I mean, if the order of condition is underground or overhead, I don't know,
How reasonable would that be?
I don't know that we really, I don't know what ground we were actually,
Half and half. You go
I
underground
don't know if
and then go to poles.
that's just the way it was written or an oversight on our part or whatever, but.
I always thought the HPDD zoning then referred back to senior housing zoning when defaulted to senior housing, and I may be wrong.
Well, it does, and I, I'm fully agreement with that. The
So
issue,
are you required in senior housing to put it underground?
yes, however, the area they're talking is not their parcel, it's outside the senior housing.
I think
Within the
that's,
senior housing, they're underground.
Gotcha.
On his parcel, he's all underground.
I don't mean to interrupt,
No, sorry.
but I think what's making this very difficult is this is not a subdivision proposal.
Right.
The only endorsement that came from the planning board was to establish the lot that was purchased. And that was an A&R or an approval not required plan. They're not building a subdivision within the lot that they purchased. They're building a community, which is probably going to be considered a condominium at the end of the day, because a master deed will be recorded, a homeowners association is gonna be recorded. The people will own their units. The homeowners association will own the roadways and the utilities within the site. So this really isn't a subdivision per se, where all of these subdivision regulations kick in.
It's not being done by right.
It's being done by site plan approval.
Correct.
That's why when I had initially spent some time with Dave George trying to struggle with the exercise, okay, we start with, HPDD, then where do we go? There's no real clear roadmap, like you would follow either a subdivision, what process do you have to file when you submit a subdivision process? Bing, here it is. What process do you have to file when you do a special permit or a site plan approval? Bing, here it is. So we just sort of agreed that, okay, we'll start with the HPDD, it's gonna be a site plan. We know that it's a senior housing project, so that if there are certain things regarding senior housing that apply, we want you to incorporate them. So we went through all of that. I understand that the struggle the town is having, but technically, it's really not a subdivision per se. We're just developing this site. And we've run into the problem of getting the power from Maple Street to here. So
Yeah.
it's RDIC, the remaining land is the RDIC land, so. Quite frankly, I think it would be a hard sell for the applicant to come to the town and say, hey, can you shell over $250,000 for us? I don't think that's gonna happen.
Not quickly. Not in any town, especially Rutland.
Yeah.
I think you can kick this around for 3 more
Yeah, I
days,
think
Chris.
we're
You gotta
ready to
make a
move.
decision and do it.
What's that, what do you say?
I said we should just vote.
Yep.
All right.
Does anybody have a copy do you have a copy of the order of conditions, attorney?
You mean the decision?
The decision, yeah, the order of,
I do.
was the original decision that stated I'd just like to read that, if you don't mind. Thank you very much, sir.
13.
Okay, thank you. So just to read this whole section here, all right? All electrical power and communication, underground and/or overhead utilities shall be installed as per the applicable utility company specifications and/or engineered specific drawings. The applicant shall provide to the applicable utility all necessary easements for such utility work access areas. Representatives of the town of Rutland, including members of the Heights Plan Development District Review Board, shall review the proposed easement locations prior to final approval. Now, when I read that, all it really says is we're approving the location, not whether it's underground or above ground. Does anybody would like to take a look? No, I'm sorry. The other thing, we never separated, Harbor's parcel from the roadway. And quite honestly, I'm not even sure this board has any authority in that roadway. We were here to do a site plan, we did the informal site plan process, and I think it's spelled out pretty clear how you get through it all, then the formal site plan process. But that's for his parcel, that's for these 142 units, those roadways. And, we discussed, water coming into the property and things like that and electric, but how does, I'm not sure where the bounds and how that, is this part of that site plan? Maybe it is, I'm not even really sure, to be honest with you. I'm not sure we're even on the right ground here, or if this is something the RDIC should say yay and nay, or who does. I'm not really sure, 100%.
You're the HPDD review
Yes,
board, so
it's
I think you
it's our
review the
charge.
entire site.
Yes, it's our charge for the entire site.
Okay.
Yep.
If they do go with the overhead poles, National Grid is gonna have to petition the select board, and the select board's gonna have to approve that too. So there's that extra.
Old DPW for setting all the pole locations.
Correct.
That's a process, yeah, okay. So, I mean, I don't see where we have, I don't know how much authority we have to force them to go underground. I don't know. I don't.
No, I agree,
think we have a- I don't think
not
we have
outside
a
of their,
law. Yeah, exactly.
not outside of their
Not outside
project.
of their project, yeah. I think inside their lot,
Yeah.
we've got them locked down underground, no doubt. But outside, I just don't see where we have it. It being an existing roadway, I don't know where the town has the right to tell anybody they have to go. You know, if you own property down the road, there's no power, and you're gonna have National Grid pay for that, bring it down the power, the town doesn't have the right to tell them to put underground.
They don't.
I just don't think they do, so I don't know that this board does. So,
And, yeah, a reference to what I said before is the, just a minute, go to the top. The HPDD, Town of Rutland zoning ordinance. And then it's paragraph 25. And then under that is section E, HPDD Review Board Review. It says the HPD, the last paragraph under that section, section E, the HPDD Review Board may grant with conditions or deny a site plan. However, it shall not deny a site plan unless it fails to furnish adequate information or fails to meet the requirements related to various considerations imposed by this bylaw, the act, the reuse plan, or the Rutland zoning bylaws. So it says basically unless we can show it doesn't
unless
meet
there's a
somebody's
bylaw somewhere,
requirements,
yeah, you know.
we will not deny. So that's the basis.
There's
That's
no law against putting overhead poles in,
right. That's what I'm getting.
unless you're in a subdivision and that's in the bylaws.
Yeah.
You know. Alright, so do you feel you guys wanna vote on this and just, get it to a head here? Any other comments from anybody else, public, otherwise, applicants? Mike?
Not me, vote away.
Okay, do we gotta close this hearing, the public hearing, Tamika, first? Or do we vote on this? How do we do this?
I would recommend voting on this, and then when you're completely done with all your discussions,
all
I
down.
would close the hearing.
You guys good with that?
Yeah.
Okay, so do I have a motion to vote on the approval of the National Grid utility electric overhead line drawings as submitted by the applicant for the overhead line power
I'll make
construction?
that motion.
Okay, we have one, do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. Any discussion on this item?
Hate to say it, but I want this project to go through. But I think in the future, it's gonna have three-phase and it come in for anything in the future. Man, oh man, it better be underground for anything better.
Yeah, and you know, just as a discussion point, you know, maybe the RDIC should look at how these other parcels could be utility, water, sewer, everything, all of that, how all that, and have some plan for that from a marketing point of view. Cause the cost is part of a developer's decision, going forward, and if the town's gonna do any of that, or if that's strictly on a developer. So, alright, any other discussion?
Chris, can you just give me a minute?
And we still have other pieces of property just below this one here, we may do something in the future.
That's what I'm saying, how, the utilities to those two parcels, that B and C parcel, as we discussed, A being this Harbor Classic Homes, the other B, behind Bill's and down along the flats there, how does that get developed and have some, just keep in mind, developing with these utilities is brutal, we call it a rational grid and never source, because it just takes forever. It does take, a year and a half to get these things done, and to make this change right here, I don't know, you make it next season. If you go underground and go through the town and all that, it would take probably another 14 months. But again, they're under time constraints with the town.
I'm gonna take a hard look at the GIS map and, how far away is this property from Kenwood, would have been easy to bring it up off of Kenwood Road or something like that.
Again, easements through people's property and things like that are difficult. You know, if you gotta go through someone's property, if the power's there, if the capacity is there.
Farmland.
You know, I think coming off of 56 is probably one of the only lines that has the ability to
Okay.
feed this thing.
I'm-
Anyways,
I'm good.
you good?
Yeah, thank you.
So any other discussion? Okay, hearing none. All in favor of the proposed amendment? Aye.
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 All, any nays? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously as submitted. Overhead is approved. You know, I don't wanna say shame on this board, we should have been a little more direct about inside the plan and outside the plan. So that's just going forward, that's just something for us to be a little more cognizant of, you know, being more specific and again, thinking these utilities through in a little more depth and developing the whole parcel, not just one specific parcel, but the whole thing, you know, what that whole vision is, and perhaps that's something that could be looked at going forward here. But again, I think you still have viable options if it's two separate parcels and they stay that way. But if you start breaking them up, it's gonna get a little tricky, something else is gonna have to happen up that roadway. And, you know, upgrades will need to be made.
I guess the only thing on that, I'd still like to understand why it's not more practical to run it on the other side of the road, where that's potentially the development parcel is gonna need power. So,
Again, Mike, because you would have those poles up against the lampposts or within sight of the lampposts, and it would look really,
okay, site-wise, perhaps I
yes,
agree.
that was our feeling.
Honestly, I just think it's the angle turning up
Okay,
the hill.
alright, move on.
In dealing with National Grid and the way and the engineers out on site, and they just always want the straightest line as they can build. Because you go along some, especially near wetlands and roadways and hills, you know, the pressure on the pole, anyways. But,
Close the hearing?
all right, do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and now, do we need another one to,
Motion to adjourn.
Yeah, let's do
Adjourn?
that. I'll make a motion, we adjourn.
all right, we have one, second?
I'll second it.
Second, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous.